is where we discuss the possibilities.
Hey guys, I'm Joe Klemczewski, founder of the Diet Doc, here with Dr. Kori Propst, our wellness director and vice president, also a health psychologist. Today we're going to talk about diet breaks. That's kind of the faddish way to describe it. Something that you and I have talked about for years and years, Kori, going back to some of our first books, is having a relaxed meal or increased amount of food, coming out of that calorie deficit for a little bit. Way back in the day, we used to call those cheat meals or cheat days or cheat weekends, all this stuff. There are reasons why you and I fell out of favor in some of that terminology. But there are some really cool reasons why this is necessary, why it's effective, and there are ways to be more effective with it. So let me start off with this little caveat in that I do want to interject that you and I are not pro low carb dieters or coaches or clinicians. So when I talk about increasing your calories, it's going to include a combination of carbohydrates and probably fat, because protein is hopefully already adequate. And just to buffer this, because somebody might wander into this podcast and not even know what kind of macronutrients we're talking about, I want to just summarize in a minute or two a presentation I did in Italy last week on different dieting methods. I did a lecture on the history and trends and how things have kind of, floated by us culturally. And Dr. Kevin Hall, the director of the NIH, one of my favorite researchers. This is a summary statement he issued about carbohydrates after an immense amount of research studying low carb versus low fat dieting methods. He said this, and I'm reading it so I don't mess up his quote. In contrast to previous claims about a metabolic advantage of carb restriction for enhancing body fat loss, our data and model simulations support the opposite conclusion. So he said, low carb diets do not have an advantage. And I'm going to continue on with just a couple more points here.
Do not have an advantage for metabolic health.
Right. Or just a metabolic advantage. They don't increase your metabolism. They don't increase your ability to lose body fat. So the Journal of the American Medical Association did a meta-analysis of 59 diets, the 59 most researched, most valid diets out there. And they said in their review, low-carb diets did not even place in the top 10 for effectiveness. Okay? So that's JAMA looking at this. Harvard, among other research groups, concluded that low-carb diets lead to the highest incidence of binge eating and that low-carb diets lead to the highest incidence of metabolic reduction, that your metabolism actually suppresses lower than ever. So I just wanted to say that as a little bit of a preface into when I say we need to increase calories once in a while, take diet breaks, have higher calorie days. It's going to be based on the premise that we haven't taken carbs out of your diet, okay? Because if we take carbs completely out, we're already suppressing your metabolism, and diet breaks are to increase or at least support the health of your metabolism and even anabolism, gaining muscle or maintaining lean body mass. And what I want to talk to you about as well, some of the social implications, some of the reasons why people just feel better doing this. So
okay, this is good.
I'm gonna toss the ball over to you for a minute here, because I just squandered our first 5 minutes talking about the basis.
Okay.
So tell me what you think about the effectiveness of implementing something like this.
Of implementing higher calorie days, of diet breaks, those sorts of structured methods.
Yeah, why do you do it, or how do you do it with clients?
Well, I do it a lot of different ways. And it really depends on the client. So, I mean, we could spend a whole podcast on the different ways for each client, but it depends on a number of factors. It depends on how they're currently eating. It depends on their social lives. It depends on how often they like to go out to eat. So what their preference is in terms of doing those sorts of things that are going to have them probably eating more fat. So I'm looking at it from a number of different perspectives, and what's going to be the easiest for them and not feel super arduous, because I'm also looking at it in terms of how are they going to be able to maintain the habits that they're structuring into their lives currently over the long haul. I don't want them to be adopting habits now that they're going to let go of later, because their life doesn't facilitate it anymore. So yeah,
as just a premise, you know, you say rightly so that you implement it in different ways for different reasons for different clients. Yeah. So why even do it? What if somebody says to you, you know, I just don't want them. I just feel better if I stay super consistent. Why would you say maybe you should consider it?
So I do say that, but I also am, I'm careful not to say, well, you have to. Mm-hmm. Because if they feel better not implementing a higher calorie day, because for some people, just structuring that into their program means that they go off the deep end and they end up, it goes much, their high calorie day ends up much higher than it needs to, and it sets them way back in terms of their fat loss goals. But I like to explain to them that it for psychological reasons, it's going to help them out. It's going to allow them to have a little bit more flexibility, perhaps structure some foods into their nutrition that they wouldn't typically eat because the food may be a little bit more indulgent. For metabolic reasons, of course, just like we've talked about, having that day where calories are a little bit higher can enhance their ability to stick to a lower calorie deficit for those, 6 to 10 days. Because some of my clients, Joe, I don't do it once a week for them. They're like, I don't really feel like I need that. I'm not hungry. I'm not feeling depleted. And those are some other reasons why I think it's appropriate, because they may end up feeling like they're trudging through quicksand by the end of the week. When we think about the caloric deficit on top of the amount of training that they're doing. And so it's really paying attention to how they're feeling, what their energy levels are like as well. But the other reason too, going back to the training, is, I'll ask them to schedule that higher calorie day the day before their most difficult, most intense, or longest training session that's going to require the most energy. And a lot of my clients are like, wow, that was freaking awesome. I can't believe how good I felt after I scheduled that higher calorie day the day before, because they were able to utilize that glycogen that they had stored. And I'll have them compare, like, let's not do it next week. I want you to feel the difference so you can understand the value of putting this into your week. So,
I love that you said that you don't necessarily make them or try and convince them to do it initially, because again, you're giving somebody a lot of things to work on. There are many moving parts to transitioning into a programming phase with a coach. So, okay, you don't want to, that's fine. But eventually they may need it or decide they want it. Social occasions will arise that dictate that they need some flexibility. Another reason, I was just talking to Paul Ravella, Coach Paul, and he's dieting for a contest, and I'm helping him this year. And he asked me the same question. He's like, Joe, I really feel like the day after a high carb day, I feel horrible, like I'm hungrier. And I said, well, how are you implementing it? And I knew initially, just by his symptoms, he was probably adding 20 grams to this meal, 20 grams to that meal, 20. And I said, no.
Go have a 12-inch sub.
Exactly. That's exactly what I told him. I said, that's always my best method, is to have, 100, 150 grams in that one meal, so you can really get that impact into carbohydrate assimilation, metabolic processes, all that. So that's what's important. And this is really, really funny to me, is I haven't really dieted formally for more than a dozen years. And for our team challenge that we're doing in the Diet Doc, I've got some clients in it. We've got teams. We're competing against each other. I said, man, I'm in with you guys. I'm gonna be in the trenches with you.
Where are you at, Joe? Where are you?
I've lost 6 pounds in 4 weeks. I know you can tell I'm looking amazing here.
Looking pretty stuck.
But interestingly, even though we teach this stuff, going back to basics and having to implement it ourselves can teach us so much. So I have relearned that by having that one meal to look forward to, that's going to be bigger, and it's not like a gross binge meal, but it's pre-qualified. I've thought it out. I know what I'm going to have. Yeah. I don't feel, too full. It does have good metabolic impact. I'm finding that my weight doesn't rise even because of new glycogen synthesis. You feel better, but it does psychologically help you get right back on track. Say, man, I've got the rest of this week to work hard. Then I'm going to have my next relaxed meal. And just going back to those basics can be really effective.
Yeah. I haven't formally dieted in quite a while either, because, well, I guess not since I retired in 2011 from natural bodybuilding. But now with my cycling goals, I still incorporate a higher day or two into my week, knowing that I'm going to have, I'm going to be putting in a significant amount of miles throughout the week, and I'm going to need that if I expect to not just feel like completely depleted all week long. And some of my clients too, they need the twice a week boost. So they're getting a midweek boost and they're getting a weekend boost. And then, we're just continuing to monitor to ensure that they're still losing body fat week to week. And then it's not necessarily slowing them down, but they're able to maintain that good level of energy to get through their training. And not everyone can do that. Not everyone needs that, of course, but.
Yeah, and there are different methods. And I'll tell you, the reason we're even talking about this, I this year did some workshops with Dr. Helms in Australia. And he brought it up as one of his topics, diet breaks. It's something he's just been dabbling with a little bit. And I think one study he kind of presented. And his conclusion was, by having actual diet breaks, meaning, you diet for a month or 6 weeks and then you take a couple weeks off, or maybe you diet for 3 months and take a month off, has some advantage. And I'm going to juxtapose this against yo-yo dieting, because when you're dieting aggressively, then kind of binge and then diet aggressively, that's been shown to slam the brakes on your metabolism aggressively. But in a more subtle approach, it is showing that you get less metabolic adaptation. But with those breaks, of course, you're now not losing weight. So he said the best case scenario is, and he's looked at some of the data more than I have, you're probably going to lose the same amount of weight in the same amount of time. There's no advantage to it, but it might be a little more comfortable for you because you get these breaks and you also have less metabolic suppression at the end. So in more of a micro cycle, that's what we've always done with having a higher carb day or a higher calorie day. Now I think Eric is looking at maybe having 2 days. So kind of a 5-day dieting, 2 days moderately higher. So you can assimilate glycogen a little bit more, for a couple days, 48 hours instead of 24. So that's an interesting premise, hypothesis.
Yeah, and I guess that for each person, the amount of the increase is going to vary quite significantly. And the only way you're going to really know if it's an effective increase is to monitor like how quickly that person comes back down in weight after those 2 higher days. and or if it takes them an entire week or two, maybe to utilize the glycogen that they and or fat that they stored during those 2 days. But when you say diet break, and according to Dr. Helms's research, all we're doing is we're raising the amount of calories up to maintenance levels.
Right. Yeah. And again, that can be a more sustained amount of time, 2 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on how much time you're dieting. But, for these little micro cycles of higher calorie days, I know that our target demographic, so to speak, our average listener or client in the Diet Doc is a general population person who, needs some practicality to this too. So being ultra precise and so forth is not necessarily as important as saying, well, hey, I've got this wedding to go to, or my kid's graduation, or I'm going to be at the Little League ball fields all day Saturday. And so we need to plan some things that a relaxed meal may not be just, hey, let's have an extra 67.5 grams of carbs at this meal from this food source. So I think starting there with it just being kind of a relaxed meal where you say, you know what, I'm not going to track everything. I'm going to be moderate. I'm just going to have a burger and fries this week. Maybe next week I'll have a piece of cheesecake after my normal dinner, or I'm going to have a T-bone steak and baked potato. What in your opinion is the best way for a client just trying to lose 30 pounds, 50 pounds in implementing that relaxed meal from a social and psychological perspective?
So going back to something you said previously, I do have general population clients who have some pretty aggressive goals, who they want to keep everything pretty tight and pretty methodical. And so for those clients, I will say, okay, once a week, let's increase your carbohydrates by 50 grams. So they know, and they can structure it and plan it and know exactly what they're going to have. With the majority of clients that we work with, it is, let's have a relaxed meal. And I will define for them why I call it a relaxed meal instead of a cheat or a splurge, because I don't want them to walk away. This is what I tell them. I don't want them to walk away from that meal feeling a significant amount of guilt or shame about what they consumed. I also don't want them to feel like they get up from the table and they can't stand up comfortably and they need to unbutton their pants to get back into their car. It is, the entire point of it is health. Okay, I want health to be the foundation of this. And, for me, I'll explain to them how I approach it, because I'm not going to have the cheeseburger and the fries and the biggie milkshake or whatever. I'm not going to feel good having that, especially because my body never consumes that. So throw that in my GI system and it's going to be like, oh my goodness, what are you doing to me?
My body loves that.
Yes, I know. We didn't get along real well when we were on trips and eating out together and traveling.
My parents did me a favor by feeding me just some Kool-Aid, so I would be resilient to foods like this. I can power through it just fine.
So, and that's cool. And some of my clients, I remember I had a client who she would go get every single week because it was her favorite thing. She'd go get a massive, wet burrito. And she lost weight like clockwork. And she loved it. It was super, that's the other thing I say. I want you to enjoy this meal. Food is meant to be enjoyed. It really is. I feel like that. Don't eat anything you don't like. There's too much awesome food out there for you to be stuffing your face full of stuff that's aversive to you. So we have the wet burrito lady, and we have other people like me who I'm probably going to make a pizza at home. I'm not going to load it with cheese. I'm not going to load it with fatty sausage, but I'm going to throw on a ton of veggies. And those of you who aren't seeing this, Joe is shaking his head like.
But I'm just like your splurge, your relaxed meal is like, I think I'll have an extra slice of avocado today, living large in Kori land.
That is not true. Slice of avocado is not going to get me 20 miles further down the cycling road. So, but it does. It really varies. I want people to enjoy the meal. I don't want them to come away feeling miserable and guilty. I don't want them to have it turn into a binge and this all or nothing, like, you know, what the hell, like already screwed up. So then it turns into an entire week of eating too much. So we plan it. We'll plan it out in advance. We'll talk about it. We'll get their questions out of the way. What's that supposed to look like? I'll give them 5 or 6 different examples based on the foods that they really do love. And when they first come to me, I get food logs from them to see how they're currently eating. So I get pretty good assessment of what they're eating and what they like.
Even this is good practice, I find, because sometimes dieting for the first time in a formal sense, you know, you're either on or off. So for somebody to realize, hey, I can sit down and eat 2 slices of pizza, I don't need 12. I mean, that takes some practice, and to learn where those levels are, where you don't feel disgusting and your weight's not changing, you know, too much. And so I think just having this relaxed meal approach where you do have some indulgent foods that you might like, but you're still monitoring and tracking it with some metric specificity, it does allow you to get ready for when the training wheels are off. And all of a sudden you're now having to eat for maintenance, maybe without the advantage of a coach. You've learned how to do this. It's real life stuff.
Yeah. What you're alluding to is mindfulness. You are mindful when you sit down to this meal, meaning you're aware. You know, I've had clients who go into some sort of social event and that they've chosen to incorporate their relaxed meal into, and it's turned into like 5 or 6 beers. And once you throw in alcohol, then like it's no holds barred. Like, like I'm just going to stuff everything I can into my face. That's not their intention, of course, but alcohol, as we know, will take away that ability to think logically and think through your decisions and be wise about what you're going to consume. And so we'll talk about that too. Yes.
That's another topic for another day. Yes. Alcohol is a good one. We should write that one down.
Enjoy a drink or 2. Have 2 glasses of water after every one of your drinks. Here's the potential of what could possibly occur when you drink. Okay, I'm not going to tell you what you can or can't do. You know, you're an autonomous individual, but we're going to get really real together about what the possibilities are. So
guys, as a way to summarize this, you know, there is an advantage to having higher calorie days, just bringing you up to maintenance level. So maybe you need 500-600 calories, maybe not even that much, one day a week. Some current hypotheses out there are that maybe even doing a smaller amount or staggering kind of a medium and a, you know, higher day, 2 days a week back to back might have some value. We're going to be watching that. But just having the ability to enjoy a meal, having an increase where you can tack it in there socially where you need it, has some tremendous value. So any kind of a diet break, no matter what you call it, is something to experiment with and use to your metabolic advantage, your social advantage, practicing for you know, a post-dieting transition. And there is true health value to, you know, keeping your metabolism being suppressed too high, maintaining lean body mass and bone mass by having those little spikes in calories throughout the week. So I appreciate your input, Kori, as always, the yin to my yang and some of this stuff.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun.
All right, guys. And again, keep the topics flowing to us on your comments. Give us some ideas, that things you want to talk about today in macro mastery. We want to be very specific with a topic, nutrition based. But as always, we appreciate it, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.